Now, it's my understanding we have a quorum. John?
There you go.
There we go. We have a quorum, you just can't see us. And I think we have 2 in Santa Maria, is that right? Okay, and Mr. Cooney's gone.
Okay.
All right, well, very good. Mr. Villalobos, will you please make the appropriate announcement and then also conduct the, not the roll call vote, but see that we're all here.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV Channel 20, at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, San Maria, and Orchid areas. Rebroadcasts of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSB TV Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Now for the roll call. Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Farini.
Here.
Commissioner Blau.
Here.
Chair Park.
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Cooney is absent today.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Wilson, can you give us the agenda status report?
Good morning, Chair Park, members of the Commission. The agenda status report as of today is that there's 2 items on the standard agenda. The first item is an appeal of a proposal to install a fence, and then there's an appeal of a homestay permit. Staff is prepared and ready to present on both items today.
Excellent. And if you're finished with the agenda status report, could you give us the projection report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And moving into the projection report, our next hearing will be on Friday, September 13th. That is a special hearing, as the hearing on the 11th was canceled. On that date, there were 2 items that were continued, and then staff is currently preparing a presentation to the Planning Commission in regards to the programmatic EIR for the Cannabis Land Use Ordinance and Licensing Program as a workshop and discussion with the County Planning Commission. Just as a word of note, staff has received a request by the applicants for the West Coast Farms to request that item be continued off of September 13th. So on the 13th, there will be a request for continuance of that item to another date, which I'll go into later in the projection report. Following the 13th, our next hearing will be on September 25th. The helistop was continued to that day, as well as an appeal of accessory structure, and then the Santa Claus Lane Beach Access and Streetscape Improvement Plan is scheduled for that date, as well as an appeal of the Cosmo Lado Demo and Rebuild House on Sandpoint Lane. That will be on September 25th, and that hearing is here in Santa Barbara. As of now, there are no items projected for October 2nd. And then following that hearing date, October 9th, there is a projected Busy Bee appeal of the Busy Bee cannabis cultivation application on the 9th, as well as a track map, and that will be heard in Santa Maria. And then moving to the next one is our hearing after that would be October 30th. There's a note that Commissioner Bradley will be absent that day, and there's currently 1 item projected for the 30th, which is a bridge replacement on Arroyo Perdon area. And then November 6th is again here in Santa Barbara, and we have projected the requested continuance for the West Coast depending on the outcome on September 13th. They've asked to be continued to the 6th. It's showing up on the projection report, but that's dependent on the Commission's action on the 13th to hear that request. And then as well on November 6th, we have another appeal. The Hacienda Cannabis Cultivation Project, as well as Long Range Planning, will be bringing the zoning ordinance package amendment. And that is scheduled for Santa Barbara at this time. And then November 13th, we have the Herbal Angels LLC project coming before you, as well as appeal of another homestay on November 13th. There's actually 2 appeals on the 13th for homestay applications, as well as the cannabis project. Moving beyond that, December 4th, there's no other items projected. And December 11th, we have tentatively placed Key Site 21 on that date. And just as we mentioned last time, and I think in email that was sent out by Mr. Villalobos, there was a request for potential additional dates for the Planning Commission to consider, as we have a number of, as we talked about last week, development projects coming potentially before you by the end of the year, which would be the Oasis project. The draft EIR will be out. I think it's out this week. And that will go out for 45 days. And then depending on the comments, that will be put on the projection report at some point once we have an idea of the timeline on those steps in the process. So that concludes the projection report. If the planning commissioners could get back to Mr. Villalobos on those dates that he sent out, it would give us some opportunities as we're looking at potential appeals coming before you and other applications that are getting close to being put on the projection report, some flexibility in scheduling those items. So that concludes the projection report, Mr. Chair.
On that request to consider other dates, are we wanting to have all of those dates, or pick one or pick two? How many do we need out of that group?
Chair Park, Members Commission, it would be beneficial to Mr. Villalobos and I is your availability on any of those dates. So it wouldn't be that, we would pick all those dates, but it would be just kind of a process of elimination as who's available on all of those dates. And so then that way we'd know when we could have a quorum looking forward on any of those dates.
Okay, but to my question, I would appreciate an answer. Are we thinking we'll need more than one of those dates?
Chair Park, I would say yes at this point. If we could anticipate needing all of those dates, and if we don't need them, then we won't schedule them. But at this point, I would ask the commission to consider using all those dates.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. Do we have any public comment on items that are not on today's agenda? Mr. Bradley, do we have any speaker slips? Okay. And then we'll move on to Planning Commissioner's information reports. Does anyone have an information report? No. Then our Director's report, Ms. Plowman.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. I don't have a lot of new information to report today, given that the board did not meet yesterday. But I did want to just remind you of what's on the long-range planning, or long-range calendar for the Board of Supervisors. They will be hearing the Patterson Avenue Holdings appeal again on the 10th of September. They also, on the 10th of September, something that may be of interest to the planning commissioners is the Community Services District is going to be bringing their strategic energy plan to the Board of Supervisors. It talks about how we can become more, I think, independent in terms of generating energy and ideas for reducing greenhouse gases, that type of thing. So it's an interesting document.
I appreciate that.
On the 1st of October, the board is going to be hearing the Nye Tennis Court appeal. And then on the 15th of October, the CEO is going to be bringing back the options for the merit-based system for retail storefront cannabis. I also wanted to announce that the cannabis and wine industry are going to be having, I guess it's sort of a workshop. It's called Together We Thrive, and that's held at Industrial Eats in Buellton on the 11th of September at 6 p.m. So that's something that my staff and I will be attending. I wanted to let the planning commissioners know about it, but we have to make sure that, as Commissioner Bradley pointed out, that if more than 2 want to attend, then it becomes a Brown Act issue. But I presume Commissioner Park will want to attend as it's in his district and an issue in his
I would,
backyard.
so I'd take first dibs.
Yes, yeah. So it'd be helpful if the other commissioners may have an interest, let us know. and then we can try and work out any issues.
And that's a Wednesday.
Yeah, this is Farini. I'm interested.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Finnery. Okay, super. Appreciate that.
He'll probably need directions. But, no, it's just an ongoing joke we have. Anyway, a gentle reminder to us, that will be helpful.
Yes.
Since it won't be appearing on a projection report.
Yes, well, we can forward the flyer to you. Yep.
Okay, well, great.
And I think that concludes my report. If I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very good. We're going to take a very brief break so I can confer with County Council.
Okay.
Mr. Villalobos, could you read that first item into the record?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on a request of Gary Gray to consider case number 19 APL 11, appeal filed on May 16, 2019, to appeal the zoning administrator's denial of case number 18 CUP 8.
Okay. Do we have any ex parte disclosures to make about visits or contacts?
Chairman Park, I actually did a site visit yesterday.
Okay. Mr. Freeney or Mr. Blau? No disclosures?
No
Okay.
visits, no ex partes.
Okay. I'm going to recuse myself on this item. My law firm, Allen and Kimball, represented a party who was adverse in litigation to the applicant on this project. I don't think that violates our conflict of interest rules or any specific FPPC regulations, but I think it creates an appearance of impropriety. So I will turn this meeting over to Ms. Bridley, our newly elected vice chair, She's smiling, she's smiling. And I will leave the room. And please call me back when it's item number 2. Thank you. Good luck.
All right, then. Luckily, Chairman Park has given me a great order of hearing item cheat sheet, so I am going to follow that carefully. So we are asking for the staff presentation at this time.
Good morning. Well, Chair Park and abstentia, Commissioner Bradley, and Commissioners. My name is Kiara Stig. I'll be presenting this Appeal 19 APL 11 of the Zoning Administrator's denial of the Gray Fence Project 18 CUP 8. The project in question is located at 5147 East Comunicello, south of the road right-of-way, and between the Highway 154 and the Painted Cave community. Surrounding development consists of rural homes, U.S. Forest Service land, and undeveloped land. Here's a more detailed aerial view of the parcel, showing the property boundary and the location of the proposed project. This map shows the zoning of the surrounding area, including the existing EDRN, existing developed rural neighborhood, and rural residential zone properties surrounding agricultural and mountain zone land. Also shown is the public land owned by the U.S. Forest Service, which bounds the property in question on 2 sides. The owner and applicant applied for a conditional use permit for a fence along the road to limit public access to the property. The edge of the property currently has 2 stone pillars that mark the entrance to the site, which lead to a building pad that had a structure on it until approximately 2010, and the property is currently vacant. The fence would be located 16 feet from the edge of pavement along East Comunicello. The applicant has proposed construction of a 118-foot long, 10-foot high fence, consisting of 8 feet of chain link and 2 feet of 3-strand barbed wire. The fence would include 1 pair of swing gates to allow for a 12-foot wide opening. No grading is proposed, and no trees are proposed for removal. The project requires a conditional use permit since it is located within the parcel's 50-foot front setback from the center line of road and is more than 6 feet high. If the fence were 6 feet high or smaller, it would be exempt from a permit. Here's a proposed elevation showing the 8-foot chain link fence and the 2 feet of barbed wire. Here's some background information. 18 CUP 8 was denied by the zoning administrator on May 6, 2019, as the zoning administrator was unable to make the required visual findings. A timely appeal was filed on May 16, 2019. So for the appeal issues, the appellant states that it is untrue that the fence would be incompatible with the surrounding rural area, that rural areas are fenced for a variety of reasons, and that the lot cannot be compared to nearby residential developments along Comunicello, specifically East Comunicello, and that Sheriff's Patrol and forestry firefighters have begged for a fence. Staff's response: the fence is not compatible with design or the scale of surrounding area. It's not subordinate to natural landforms. No surrounding development on East Comunicello incorporates similar material in the front setback. So although a variety of fence designs are used in different rural areas, there is no similar fence of similar materials, size, scale within the surrounding area. And per the Forest Service, Ranger John Smith, there is an email in the staff report. The proposed fence is incompatible with Forest Service visual policies, and 2 of the bordering parcels to the parcel in question are Forest Service land. So although I'm sure the Forest Service would not mind a fence to prevent people from going on the parcel, the proposed fence would be incompatible with their own visual policies. Appeal issue 2, a member of the public on the road in front of the lot cannot see the ocean, islands, nor vistas of anything, and the fence would be constructed of transparent material. Staff response: the proposed fence would impede views along a public road, East Comunicello, of the ocean and Goleta Valley due to breaks in vegetation, as shown in the photo on this slide. It would not be subordinate in appearance to natural landforms, which is part of our comprehensive plan visual policy, and it would be visible and imposing as viewed from East Communis Yellow, given the height and proximity to the road. So the proposed fence would be inconsistent with policy, notably the comprehensive plan visual policy and the Eastern Goleta Valley community plan visual policies. It would not be compatible with nor subordinate to the surrounding rural area. It would intrude into the skyline from public viewing places and would impact views to and from public vistas and along East Communis Yellow. The project is exempt from CEQA, since CEQA does not apply to projects which a public agency rejects or disapproves pursuant to Section 15270B. Staff's recommendation is that the Commission denies the appeal, Case 19 APL 11, make the required findings for denial of the project specified in Attachment A of the staff report, including CEQA findings, and determine the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines sections 15270B, included as attachment. That should be B, not C, attachment B of the staff report. So this concludes my presentation, and staff is available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ristig, and I would like to ask if the applicant/appellant, actually, no, that's wrong. Does the commission, my fellow commissioners up in the North County, have any questions for staff? At this time? Okay.
No questions at this time.
Thank you. So hearing none from the commissioners, let's go to the applicant/appellant presentation, if you will.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning.
Commissioners.
Commissioners, the folks in the North County. I appealed this finding of the staff and of the hearing officer because I don't believe that they gave any consideration at all to some of the costs and benefits associated with the project that's being proposed here. They are looking at the fence strictly from the standpoint of their fairly rigid standards. In fact, their standards would indicate they'd prefer the fence of any height to be invisible, which is an impossible standard itself. Even a 6-foot fence is going to intrude onto the skyline, as the staff points out in their report. However, it's something they can't do anything about. My position is that if there's no consideration taken of the costs and benefits of a project, that we're not being very logical. This community, starting in my first recollection, is the Refugio fire in the mid-50s. My most recent one would be the more recent Hezazita and T fires. All those fires and ones in between, including the Coyote fire, were caused by public incursion into the forest where they had no business being and should have been precluded by some sort of mechanical means. They were not. They got in and they started a fire. And it's only a matter of time when people can get into the forest that will cause it to happen. Our position is that essentially we've tried to prevent people from going on the lot with lesser fences. They've proved to be abysmal failures for the simple reason that if it's not impressive enough and imposing enough fence, people go over it. They just simply go over it, and before long the fence is gone. We've lost 2 fences that I put up to vandals and to people being able to get over it, get behind it, and tear it down. Some people who habituate that area up there are not very nice people, and they're looking for ways to cause trouble, and they will cause vandalism and problems. And we believe that a more imposing fence that's more difficult to get over would simply make it less likely that there would be this kind of problem continuing in the future. We are concerned about our neighbors. First, as the map showed you, the Painted Cave community is right across the East Canyon. If a fire starts in that canyon, the Painted Cave community would be in flames in a matter of minutes. On the side of the West Canyon, we've got 2 big ranches over there who are our neighbors. If a fire starts in that canyon, they'll be burned out in a matter of a few minutes. We don't want the public to be able to go in there. The fire department's proposal to build 2 fences is mildly deranged. They say put in 1 fence to stop people and another one to stop cars. I don't really think that makes any sense, because if people are able to get past any kind of a barrier, they will be into the forest in a matter of a few minutes if they want to go there. We believe that the public benefit of having an increased level of safety available for people who live in the community to not have to have the higher risk of fire danger is enough of a benefit to outweigh the relatively modest costs that staff has pointed out are imposed by this fence, which are slight impairments of view lines. I would not dispute that. It is a transparent fence. If you walk past a chain link fence from any distance, you can see right through it. So there's a relatively modest cost involved, and they are basically imposing the standard that they use, which is, I would call it largely an aesthetic one, but nevertheless, it's the standard they're using. They're using that standard without any consideration for what the actual cost is of not doing something. The actual cost of not doing something could be rather severe. And after better part of a decade of trying to keep people out of that lot, since I became responsible for it, I finally brought this proposal to build a fence that I believe, based upon folks I've talked to who build fences for a living, that this would largely preclude the problem continuing in the future. Now, it does not look like fences of other nearby properties down the roadways with their homes. That is really not a very fair comparison, because those lots down there are occupied. People are there. They have a driveway, they have a gate, the people are there, and the fact of anyone trying to intrude onto the property is relatively slight by the very fact that they would have to go into a place where there are people, and they would be run off, or somebody would call the sheriff. We don't live up on the top of that mountain. So if we don't have some kinds of means of keeping people out fairly effectively without anyone being there to watch for them, it's going to happen, it will continue to happen, and we will eventually have something happen which burns the forest. I just don't want to see it happen to those folks who live around us, and it's something we can preclude by simply keeping the public out of there. I appreciate the commissioner going by and visiting. You saw the situation. If you look to the immediate east, it's a steep drop off into heavy brush and rough hillsides. To the immediate west, an even steeper drop off. This little promontory is the only place for miles where you can actually go onto the premises and go into the forest. And I don't know how far you went onto the lot. You're welcome to look as hard as you want, as much as you want. Yeah, I mean, if you go further down, you'll find there are trails that actually go into both canyons. The one to the left goes into the East Canyon, is actually fairly passable. The one to the right is actually very dangerous. If someone goes down that trail, they could probably die before they got to the bottom. So I just really think that this is something where there are some benefits here that have to be considered somewhere at some level. And I understand staff's position. They have a set of rules to follow. They follow the rules. They come up with a finding, and that's where we stand. But I believe that this body may have the ability to weigh the cost versus the benefits of this fence proposal in order to make a finding that even though it does violate the fundamental principles that are being imposed by the county staff and the hearing officer, that could be mitigated by the fact there's a much larger benefit available by waiving or modifying those standards a little bit in this particular case, because I think it is a relatively unique situation. I thank the commissioners for their time today. I thank the staff for all their hard work. I would like to hear what you have to say today. If you want to make a decision, I'd be happy to hear it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that presentation, and I'll just bring it back to the Planning Commission and ask if anyone had questions for the applicant appellant up there. No. Hearing none from the North County. I did have just a couple, so hop on up.
Thank you.
So you said that you actually owned the property for 10 years and you had 2 fences that were installed but removed or vandalized or something?
There's actually more history to the lot than that, ma'am. My grandparents acquired that property in 1949, and at that time there was a small dwelling on that piece of property. It was fenced at that time with a board fence, and the dwelling was actually occupied by people that my grandfather rented to. So there were people there on a regular basis. At some point, the people who were living there became problematic. This is after my grandparents were gone, and so we asked them to leave, and after some difficulty with the sheriff having to go up and get them off, we got the people who were there out. That would be about, I'd say 20 years ago. At that point, the property still had a dwelling on it, and it was vacant. It immediately became an attractive nuisance, and the fence began to be encroached upon. It was a board fence, and was actually torn down a couple of times and turned into firewood that was used for a bonfire in the middle of the yard. We did eventually remove all the structures from the property because they were relatively old, beat up, and not particularly serviceable. Furthermore, there were no utilities there, so we thought it was best to remove the attractive nuisance, just scrape the lot down to rock, which we did, and we built another fence, which probably lasted 3 months before it was also gone. And this is all going back about 10 years now when the buildings were removed. So we're just looking for an opportunity here to improve the situation for the overall public welfare. I don't have any particular dog in this fight one way or the other, except I just hate to see something like this go on where there's going to be a problem, which is going to happen at some point, and it can be stopped now. Does that respond to your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Okay, so we have no public comment speaker slips either, so that would mean I'm closing the public comment and the appellant's presentation. And I'm assuming that you have no rebuttal to your own presentation, so we'll move right along to the commission's deliberations. So my fellow commissioners up there in the North County, did you have any comments? I know this is in the 2nd District, so I'm fully in the spotlight. Did you have anything else to add at this point?
This is Commissioner Blau. Yeah, I just have a couple questions of staff. Was there any public comment at the zoning administrator's hearing? And I'm surprised there's none here today if this thing is actually, in the view of the the staff, that's that ugly, if you want to call it, lack of a better word.
Commissioner Blau through the chair. So I think part of the reason for that may be the fact that it's a pretty rural area and the noticing boundaries are 300 feet from the property line. So not many people would have been noticed, but at the zoning administrator hearing, I received an email and had a phone call with a neighbor who lives in one of the residences relatively nearby who expressed reservations about the project and did not feel that the fence was appropriate in scale. But yeah, that's all I heard at the zoning administrator hearing.
I should
Thank
point
you.
out that that particular correspondence was not mentioned at the hearing.
Okay, because, I'm sorry, we closed the public comment and the
sorry.
appellant time, but I think that Ms. Ristic explained that that was post-hearing, so this was a follow-up discussion. So Commissioner Blau, did you have any other questions, or Commissioner Freeney?
No, I'm ready to give you my tentative vote on the thing. I'll let Commissioner Freeney go first.
Okay, well, it's a tough one. I think I understand what staff's doing, but when I look at this, the compelling argument from the landowner and the remoteness of the property and lack of public opposition, it seems like we should let the guy do what he wants to do. It doesn't seem unreasonable. He could go in and put up a 6-foot chain link fence without any conditions and without any permits. So, but I think what he articulated is that that's not the most effective fence, according to what he has learned from the fence builders from a security standpoint. So I would support the applicant and let the fence be built.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner Freeney. Mr. Blau, did you have any other comments, or are we looking for someone to make a
No,
motion?
I'm
other than
agreeing
me?
with Commissioner Freeney. That's my take too. This is a pretty rural property, and there is a compelling reason for doing it. I mean, even if I'm a neighbor and I don't like looking at it, I sure like the idea that it may prevent a fire that's going to be catastrophic and much more, detrimental to me than an extra 3 feet or 4 feet on what would otherwise be a fence that doesn't require any approval.
Thank you, peers up there. So I am the 2nd District Commissioner, and this is in the 2nd District. And interestingly, I'm also a trained planner, so I would have to weigh more in staff's analysis. I appreciate that you understand that there are rules that don't seem to make sense in your case right now, but I would more weigh toward those rules. Partially because I believe that there was no letter of record from the county fire department. We do have a statement from the National Forest Service that doesn't seem to indicate the same sort of concern. Admittedly, that's not the owner's position. However, also, driving along that road and just the general area, having a chain link fence with a barbed wire fence, topping it, it would be pretty out of character with the look. Now, all that said, in fact, I talked to the planner yesterday and I said, you know, I'm really struck here because frankly, I want to let people put up a fence on their property. I'm kind of a property rights person too. So I'm a little relieved to hear my other two commissioners are moving toward the fence and I'm moving against it. So to get this through the process, I think I would actually have to make a motion to uphold staff's recommendation and deny the appeal, and I would look for a second on that. Hearing none, that motion fails. Is there an alternate motion?
I'll move that we approve the fence as proposed by the applicant.
Is there a second?
Mrs. Chair.
Yes.
Before we vote, just to be clear, we don't currently have all the findings and documents to take that action, but staff indicates they could put those together if we trail this item until after the next homestay item, and it could come back for a vote.
Okay, that's fine. So we don't take a motion on this now because we don't have the findings, correct?
Correct, but I think we have enough direction from the commission for staff to prepare documents to return in just a little bit.
Perfect. Okay, so if you understand that, what we're going to do is just trail the item until after the next item so that staff can make the opposite findings, so you can have the fence approved. And that's what we'll do. We'll just drop it at this time and close that item. All right? Thank you. That means we move on to our next item right away.
Do you mind if we take a couple minute break so I can go grab the chair?
Yes, thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Well, we've reconvened and I'm back. So, Mr. Villalobos, would you read item number 2 on our standard agenda into the record?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following is a hearing on the request of Lisa Romasanta Crowder and 21 other neighbors as joint appellants to consider case number 19 APL 17 to appeal the director's approval of case number 19 HOM 46.
Do we have any ex parte or site visit disclosures in this matter?
Chairman Park, I did a site visit yesterday also.
Very good. I did a site visit this morning. I just drove around the neighborhood for a long time early in the morning. And how about up north? Any site disclosures?
None here.
None here.
Very good. Okay, do we have a staff presentation?
Thank you. Sorry. Good morning, Chair Park. Thank you for having me today. My name is Gwen Baylor. I will be presenting the Romasanta Crowder and neighbors appeal of the McInerney homestay proposed to be located in the 3rd District. Here is a vicinity map showing the project site, which is located in northern San Ynez, west of Highway 154 and north of Highway 246. As you can see here, the project parcel is off Refugio Road in the 1E1 residential zone district, and it is surrounded by other residential zones and the Ag 15 zone. The project parcel is 0.83 acres, and it contains one single-family dwelling with an attached 3-car garage, which would be used for the proposed project. The parcel also includes an attached accessory dwelling unit with a 1-car garage. The proposed project would allow for a 3-bedroom homestay located in the 4-bedroom single-family dwelling. 6 adult guests would be allowed overnight with quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. Parking is located on-site in the attached 3-car garage and also in the driveway area. The project application was submitted on May 29th, and the appeal was filed on June 3rd. So the first appeal issue raised by the appellants is that the short-term rental was in operation from April 2018 to June 2019, prior to approval of the homestay permit. Staff's response is that planning and development zoning enforcement staff investigated the short-term rental and issued a notice of violation. The zoning violation was abated in March 2019 when the short-term rental ceased, and the enforcement case was closed at that time. Operation of the homestay cannot begin until the permit is approved by the Planning Commission and is issued by Planning and Development. The second appeal issue is that the owner does not live on site. Staff responds that, as allowed by the Land Use and Development Code, a long-term tenant does currently live on site. The applicant provided 2 forms of proof of residency as part of the supplemental application. The third appeal issue is that the applicant has not paid the transient occupancy tax. Staff maintains that Planning and Development does not enforce Santa Barbara County Code Chapter 32 regarding taxation. The Santa Barbara County Tax Collector's Office will require the applicant to pay the TOT for operation of the homestay. The fourth appeal issue is that quiet hours have not been observed by the applicant. Staff's response is that, provided the permit is issued and the applicant begins operating the homestay, the applicant will be required to maintain quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. as part of the project, during which time sound levels would need to be 45 decibels or below at the property line. Future violations may result in investigation and enforcement actions by Planning and Development. The fifth appeal issue states that the proposed homestay would change the lifestyle of the Santa Ynez Valley and that additional homestays would turn the neighborhood into a motel-oriented area that would serve tourists and the casino industry. Staff responds that compliance with the ordinance development standards would ensure that the homestay would be compatible with surrounding properties. The Board of Supervisors found that the homestay ordinance maintains the integrity and intent of residential zone districts. The sixth appeal issue states that the homestay would allow for unlimited large parties daily. The project proposes 6 adult transient occupants per night, with no limit on minors. And staff responds that according to the Land Use and Development Code, 12 adult guests would be allowed for a total of 18 adults, excluding minor children. There is a possibility that groups of 18 adults and unlimited minors would be present on the site. Any future violations of the maximum occupancy could be reported to planning and development. Law enforcement with jurisdiction over the site is the county sheriff if needed. The seventh appeal issue states that visitors and guests could park over 20 vehicles. Staff's response is that parking for the project would be required to be on site. Adequate parking is provided by the attached 3-car garage and approximately 320 square feet of driveway area. This fulfills the 1 required spot per bedroom used for the homestay. The 8th appeal issue states that planning and development lacks the staff to monitor homestays, and neighbors are burdened with monitoring. Staff maintains that the county's zoning enforcement is a complaint-based system, and any future violations could be reported to planning and development for enforcement actions, which could include revocation of the permit. The 9th appeal issue states that the proposed homestay would reduce the number of homes available for working-class families in the Santa Ynez Valley. Staff responds that the owner or long-term tenant would be required to live on site, and currently a long-term tenant does live on site in the accessory dwelling unit. The 10th appeal issue states that the homestay would burden local infrastructure, and local homeowners would not profit from operation of the homestay, but the county would profit through TOT payments, appeal fees, and permit fees. Staff responds that the single-family dwelling was subject to all planning and building requirements at the time of permitting and construction, including adequate services and access. And revenue from the transient occupancy tax payments are deposited into the county's general fund, which pays for basic public services. Further, planning and development operates at full cost recovery for permit services. The 11th and final appeal issue states that the homestay does not fit the intent of the 1E1 zone district. Staff responds that the 1E1 zone is applied to areas appropriately located for one-family living. This zone is intended to protect the residential characteristics of an area and to promote a suitable environment for family life. A long-term tenant would continue to live on site. As explained previously, the Board of Supervisors found that the homestay ordinance maintains the integrity and intent of residential zone districts. Compliance with the development standards outlined in the Land Use and Development Code would minimize potential impacts on surrounding areas. In summary, the proposed homestay is compatible with the 1E1 zone district, and it meets all applicable requirements of the Land Use and Development Code, Santa Ynez Valley Community Plan, and Comprehensive Plan. Staff recommends that the Commission deny the appeal, make the required findings for approval specified in Attachment A, determine that the project is exempt from CEQA, and grant de novo approval of the project, subject to the conditions of approval. Staff is available today to answer your questions, as is the applicant and the appellants. Thank you very much.
I have some questions. How long has the owner of this property owned it?
Chair Park, thank you for your question. I think that question is best answered by the applicant, who is here today.
Okay. And what is the evidence that we have a long-term tenant there?
Thank you, Chair Park, for your question. The evidence provided by the applicant at the time of submittal was a utility bill with the long-term tenant's name and address of the parcel, as well as a copy of the long-term tenant's driver's license with the applicant's address, with the homestay address on the long-term tenant's driver's license.
Any other evidence?
That's the evidence that has been provided as required by the homestay supplement.
And which utility?
The utility was, Chair Park, internet bill.
Okay. Any other questions from other commissioners of staff?
Yes, Chair Park.
Commissioner Freeney.
Thank you. Of staff, on your background information, you discussed the process that the applicant went through on building an ADU, and I understand all of that. Does that have any bearing on their ability to have the homestay rental, or is that just more background information on the building activity on the property?
Thank you, Commissioner Freeney, for your question through the chair. That information is just background on the construction of the building.
Okay, thank you. And then, if you could help me along here, is there a limit? Is it a percentage of rooms that they can homestay rent, or is it just one room needs to be occupied by an owner or a long-term tenant?
Commissioner Farini, through the chair, thank you for your question. So the Land Use and Development Code allows a maximum of 3 bedrooms to be rented in a home. And whether the owner or long-term tenant lives in an extra bedroom in that home or in a separate unit on site, in an accessory dwelling unit, residential second unit, or a bedroom in the same home is not specified. It can be either way. But the maximum is 3 bedrooms per single-family dwelling.
Chair Park,
Okay,
Chair
so-
Park, Commissioner Finney, just if I may provide some clarification.
Yes, Mr. Wilson?
Just to follow up on your question in regards to the ADU, they can use the ADU, the long-term tenant can stay in the ADU, and the other dwelling unit can be used as a homestay, but it can't be the reverse. They can't use the ADU as the homestay. So to answer your question, the long-term tenant could be in the accessory dwelling unit, and then the other structure on the property could be the homestay, but not the reverse.
And basically, the conversion to the ADU allows a place to house the long-term tenant so that they can claim that's inhabited by an owner or long-term tenant so they can apply for a homestay. So it was a key piece of it. Any other questions, Mr. Farini?
That covers it. Thank you.
Ms. Bradley, you have any questions?
I do have several questions. So in the background documentation provided by the applicant, was there a lease for the long-term tenant in the ADU? Do we know how long that person is occupied, or how long the lease is projected to continue?
Commissioner Bradley, through the chair, thanks for your question. I do not have a lease agreement for the long-term tenant, but I have discussed this issue with the owner, and it sounds like the long-term tenant has lived there for at least 6 months, but I think that the owner who's here today, the applicant, can speak more to that issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My second question has to do with the parking. And I understand that they have a 3-car garage, and the ADU does not require its own stall. And then I think your staff report called out there was another about 320 square feet of unpaved area. So I'm wondering if anyone has actually done a parking layout of that, because if you have 12 cars, 320 square feet is not enough to park another 12 cars. So, I would guess, if I've got the math right. So I'm wondering, how did the analysis come around to conclude that the parking was sufficient on site, especially considering Rifuhu has no public parking?
Commissioner Bradley, through the chair, thank you for your question. The Land Use and Development Code requires 1 parking space per bedroom of the homestay, in addition to the 2 parking spaces for the single-family dwelling. So that is really what staff is addressing when we say that the parking is adequate for the project. And the accessory dwelling unit, just to clarify, does have its own 1-car garage. So there is separate covered parking. Covered parking is not required, but there is a separate parking spot for the accessory dwelling unit. And the I didn't verify that 12 spots were available in the driveway, but I looked at the driveway area and saw that there were many additional spots that were not tandem. That's one of the requirements of the Land Use and Development Code. There were additional spots for guests. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have some follow-up questions. The appellants make 2 claims about illegal operation of a homestay. One is that from, I think it was April 2018 until even June 2019, there was an unpermitted homestay operating on the subject parcel. Looks like a zoning violation was submitted on March 22, and that was, apparently the case was closed on March 26 when the owner ceased operation. So first of all, do you have a history? Has staff determined that there was an illegal operation of a homestay for the prior year?
Thank you, Chair Park, for your question. So yes, staff has concurred that there was an illegal homestay, short-term rental in operation. And the zoning enforcement case and investigation that was done verified that information. And then the closure of that case showed, in discussions with the zoning enforcement staff, confirmed that the homestay was no longer in operation in March.
I'm having a hard time reconciling that with the claim by the appellants that and they report some days in June 2019 where it was operated as, again, an illegal homestay. Have you tested the veracity of that claim or determined it in any way?
So Chair Park, if I may respond to that. So we don't have any independent verification of the statements made by the appellants, as there was no complaint filed. According to our records available to us at this moment, no complaints were filed or investigation initiated through our office. So we don't have any independent verification of the claims that submitted by the appellants at this time.
Or any evidence that they were incorrect either, correct?
That's correct, Chair.
And in making the determination that there was an illegal homestay for that prior year, did you receive any justification of why this was occurring, notwithstanding the fact we had an ordinance in play or in place at that time?
So Chair Park, if you may give us one moment to get you the answer.
Sure.
Park, members of the commission, the records available to us that has been submitted just validates that there was a complaint. An investigation occurred, found that there was an operation that was occurring without permits, and then based on the information that we have, it ceased operation, the case was closed. Outside of that, we don't have any information. As far as to your other question, you may direct that to the appellant as far as why they were operating without permits. I think, or the applicant, sorry. I think that's the case on a number of cases that come before the Planning Commission, as far as operations that come before you that are unpermitted. And one mechanism to abate that is to seek the permit that would grant that use to occur. So I think that's the case before you.
Well, I have reasons for asking the question. And it is true that the homestay ordinance was in effect the entire time of this homestay operation, correct?
Chair Park, yes, that is correct.
Yeah, it's in effect all of 2018. Okay, no further questions to staff. Let's have our appellant presentation. And I understand the appellants want to have two people come to the mic and make a presentation. Do you know how long you want to take?
As much time as we, and I'm sure you're going to have some questions. So I understand we have at least 15 minutes and that we get rebuttal time after your
Okay, what I'm going to do is I don't think you'll need it, but I'm going to give you 30 minutes overall, okay?
Thank
And
you.
so if you want to take 3 minutes now and 27 minutes for rebuttal, you do that, you won't. Or if you want to do the reverse, probably what you'll want to do is take about 20 minutes and save 10 minutes for rebuttal. And I'm going to give the same time to the applicant if the applicant desires it. But I doubt that either of you will need all that much time. So don't feel compelled to just use the time.
I won't babble
All
unless
right.
necessary.
Go ahead, please.
I'd like to say good morning to the staff, everyone involved here. My name is Lisa Romasanta Crowder. My family and I have owned and lived on this property next door for 22 years. For the last year and a half, our life at home has changed. This homestay is a party house. This is not a house that a family of 4 comes and rents and goes and visits our valley. This is a house that either bachelor parties or big groups, the rental cost at $550 a night alone with a 3-night minimum of this 4-bedroom house that has been rented as a 4-bedroom house, not as a 3-bedroom. I spoke with somebody on June 9th, 2019, who was the short-term tenant who had rented 4 bedrooms through Airbnb. I gave you, the staff, his name and number to verify this information, that the house was still being illegally rented during the entire time that he was told to stop. I gave you the date of April of 2018 because that is the first guest comment with a date. So really, those people stayed before April. So this has been going on since before April 2018. My understanding is this gentleman also has more than one. He knew the rules. He's been non-compliant the entire time. I'm not sure why somebody who wasn't paying their TOT tax, hadn't gone through the process to get the permits, is renting out more rooms than is allowed. The short term has been allowed to go through this permit process. I have called 3 times. You guys indicated I called March 22nd and you closed the case in 4 days. I wasn't notified that anything was closed. I wasn't notified a case was actually opened. I called to say there's an illegal Airbnb rental next door to me with loud parties continually. So I just wanted to introduce kind of how we got to this place, and we would kind of like to go issue by issue. Some of the information is incorrect. It has been a 4-bedroom rental, not a 3-bedroom. I don't believe the garage is available to anybody per the rental advertisement. So I'll let Kim, my neighbor, speak, and then if we could go issue by issue.
Hi, my name is Kim Jost. Thank you very much for hearing our appeal today. I live at 1455 North Refugio, across the street from the homestay applicant. The thing that I would really want to reiterate is that we have a proven track record of non-conformance from the applicant, or from the owner, where continually he has marketed his homestay, has continually rented it before permit for well over a year. Through verification of people who have actually rented the property, they have said that, yes, that we rented 4 rooms. We just heard that 3 is the maximum. He had not paid his TOT tax before the permit. So the gentleman, Mr. McInerney, has just shown and proven to us just a pattern of nonconformance. The only thing that we have as rural, residential, single-family people neighborhood is our reliance upon county governance to protect our zoning and our way of life. And I've heard repeatedly from staff that they use the terminology that that compliance will be required, and yet on a number of the issues, and I can go back through those for you, but where it says if there's a problem, enforcement may occur or could occur, doesn't give me a whole lot of satisfaction and thinking, well, maybe something will be done, maybe something won't. Something could, maybe it couldn't. So when you have someone coming asking for a permit that has a proven history of non-conformance, and that you're recommending that that permit be approved, and then after approval, maybe enforcement might happen, maybe it won't. That puts us as property owners and our neighborhood in real jeopardy. So I really would ask you to consider that. So that was really or issue 1, that he, within that, has been running it continually and has marketed it, which I believe your background information shows. It's been on the internet. So he has been marketing that property.
The long-term renter that has been there has not stopped the noise or anything that has gone on with the short-term tenants that rent it on a nightly basis. So when staff has made it so that it can be a long-term renter and not an owner, that renter is not going to approach people who are loud and obnoxious, a group. Again, this is not a sweet little family with their 2 little kids coming to play in the valley. These are party people coming to party, and they do. Nowadays, the noise has gotten very loud because you all have Bluetooth speakers. It's not like this property has to have a speaker system set up for noise and music. Everybody brings their Bluetooths. This person who's a renter of the property, the long-term renter of a couple of months, is not going to go after these people. So are they going to call the cops? They're not. They haven't. Nothing has been done for a year and a half of us having to live with ongoing noise, ongoing dogs that are not familiar to my dogs, which then makes my dogs bark all night long. I realize if it was a regular renter in there for 30 days at a time, they'd have their dog. My dogs would know their dogs. So my dogs freak out every couple of nights because new people come in with their service dogs. And the person on June 9th had his service German Shepherd in this 4-bedroom rental. I got his name, his phone number. Y'all could have called him and verified that on June 9th, he was still renting as a 4-bedroom illegal Airbnb. So the person who sits in that adjacent dwelling does not do anything to control the main house. I don't know if that woman even works nights. Is she there at night? Who's to say she's not a casino worker working the casino all night and come home at 10 o'clock in the morning? So that rule does not help us, the neighbor, at all. Issue.
Well, and in regards to the noise, and again, by the letter of the law, I imagine Mr. McInerney is fine. But the thing is, you would have to call the police and have a written record to have any kind of a chain of record of proof that a noise violation has occurred. Otherwise, you're just talking a he said, she said. And now you're just pitting neighbor against neighbor. It's just a very bad situation. For issue 3, in regards to the TOT, I just want to say again, I know Lisa, when she first sat down with county staff, they informed her that TOT to that date had not been paid on that property. So that's how we know that no TOT prior to his permit had been paid. So again, another non-compliance issue.
And with the noise ordinance, we all know that we, homeowners, have to stop at 10 o'clock. The way your code has been written, they're supposed to stop at 10 o'clock. I then make a complaint. They get an hour to have that complaint given to them. Per your code, they then get 2 hours to comply. So every single night, that house has until 1 a.m. to comply with the noise ordinance of Santa Barbara County. How is that right? I, the property owner, stop at 10, they get until 1. That doesn't seem right. So we've talked about the TOT.
I think we're on issue 6. Unless you have something for me.
Issue 6, talking about the size and the amount of people. Again, this house is marketed. If you look at the comments that this homeowner chose to put up on their Airbnb rental site, it's the comments that say, this is a great house for big groups. I'm bringing my big group back. Read the comments that are in the packet that I gave to you. These are not my comments, these are their guests commenting that this is the greatest house for big parties. And it is. I don't want the big parties next to my house. I doubt you guys want them next to your house.
Staff was very good to go over what was allowed, 2 adults per bedroom, and then basically two guests per adult, plus unlimited children. What that amounts to with your 18 adults being allowed to be at that house with unlimited children, that equates to, I just want you to hear this, 6,570 potential people. Would that probably happen? No, but that is what the code provides for. That in no way, and I know that the Board of Supervisors have, said with the homestay that the way it was written, it was going to protect the, quote, integrity and intent of the neighborhoods. Having 6,570 people, different people, strangers to our neighborhood, marching through, does not protect the integrity or intent of our neighborhood. I know my neighbors. If something happens, I know I can go to them for help, and I know they're watching out for me. These are strangers with, and who knows if they're good or bad? We don't. We really don't know if they have records or what kind of people they are. But that just destroys a neighborhood. Absolutely destroys a neighborhood, for which, and the thing is that with them, with this whole homestay and the language that was allowed to be put in with, or a long-term tenant, what has happened is this county has allowed for a business model to be placed right in the middle of residential area. And that is what is happening. These people that are buying up homes for homestay live elsewhere, put a long-term tenant there, call it good. And all that long-term tenant is, at the very best, would be a night clerk. So they're now purchasing properties for the intent of having a little mini motel. Oh, okay.
Do you have more?
I just want to also address the reduction in the rental market that this whole plan causes. I happen to own other houses in San Ynez Valley that are rental houses. When my rental houses, this past year that came up, I have a house in Ballard. I cannot tell, and Buellton, I cannot tell you the amount of applications and people begging for this available rental house. I had people saying, I'll pay a year's rent going off of their credit cards to obtain housing. If you really look into the rental market, and I do all the time, this is causing a shortage of housing for our working people of our county. It is happening all over the state, probably all over the country. But we're dealing with Santa Barbara right now, and I can tell you the housing shortage is being made exponentially worse by allowing these short stays. That house would be a home to a family of at least 4 or 5. That was built as a 6-bedroom house, chopped so it could be a little rental next door by Mr. McInerney. This is again a 4-bedroom house being advertised as a 4-bedroom house for a year and a half illegally. Why you guys would want to allow somebody's, now again, you're allowing his property value as a business to be growing hugely. He has a mini hotel next to me in my residential house. My property value is going down with that next door to me. Me trying to sell my house if I wanted to, I don't want to. I've lived there for 22 years. But to me, if I wanted to sell my house next to an Airbnb type of rental, nobody's going to buy it. So you've destroyed my value in my house by allowing him to put a business, a hotel, next to my house in a residential neighborhood that the county of Santa Barbara deemed residential. That is not business district. We have business districts. This is not a business district. I know the code has been written to allow these homestays. He is not even complying with your code for the homestay. Please do not allow this to be permitted. You are affecting my daily life, our home, our neighborhood, our valley. Let's make the right decisions for the community, not this one person.
I guess just in closing, I would say ditto. But the fact that when you have somebody who has shown disregard for the code, has shown a pattern of nonconformance, and your code says that you will enforce, why would you give a permit to someone who's already proven that they're not going to abide by a code? And then
Even
put the burden-
during
yeah.
this process, that you told him what the rules were. You told him to cease and desist renting. He continued. He continued.
That's it for me.
I have 3 questions for you, if you stay
Yes,
at the
sir.
podium for a moment.
Yes, sir.
As to your last item, Ms. Romasana, your papers say that there was a violation in June of this year. Would you describe your reasoning for asserting that?
There was a rental, a person in there who was a short-term renter. I went and spoke with him on June 9th at about 10:30 in the morning. He was loading up his car. I went in and said, gosh, can you tell me about this? This is a really cool rental. I acted like I was a person interested. I didn't say I'm a neighbor who's upset or who has filed. He gave me all the information. I said, is this a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom were you able to rent? He said, it's a 4-bedroom. And I said, you rented all 4 bedrooms? And he said, yes, we did. And I asked a few more questions, and then I said, and where did you see this? Where did you find this at? I need to find out, and so I can rent it. And he said, it's on Airbnb right now. And I said, oh, I'm having trouble with my phone. He found it on his phone. He sent it to me, which gave me his name and number, which I then gave to you. I told him that I appreciate your information. I didn't tell him that I was a person who was going to be giving his information out, but it was clear the man was still renting the house as of June 9th, 2019, as a 4-bedroom rental.
Is your house next door?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay. So I'll ask this question of you, but Kim, if you want to, that's fine too. You mentioned a disturbance that occurs on occasion. How frequent is that?
Most often when it's rented, if you look at the dates, and I wrote the dates down for how often it was rented this past year, which is 25 out of 30 days a month or something. I was trying to figure it out. Again, the people who rent this house are not a family who's coming in to visit the valley and do family little things. This is a house that brings the wine people in to go as bachelor party, and I've spoken to enough of them that I know what they're there in the valley for. It is a group rental house. Not many families are spending $550 a night, 3-night minimum, plus the cleaning fee, the this fee, the that fee. So that rental is not bringing in families. It is a group rental. The 3 garages are not available for the tenants to rent. So your parking situation is what's outside of the house. No tenant has ever rented the garages.
So while this was operating, how many times a month? Let's quantify a little bit. How many times a month would you have been disturbed? Just trying to get a sense of
Out
this.
of 25 of the nights, a good 20 of them, we would go out and say, what's going on? My dog's 25. A large part of it would be barking because those people all bring their dogs. A large percentage. So at least 75%, I would say. I don't know how to. I
So in a
didn't write it
30-day month,
down.
you'd be disturbed more than 20 times?
At least, yeah.
Okay.
Because again, it's a party house. It's not a, let's go in and put the kids to bed at 8 o'clock after a rough play day.
I read the appeal papers, and I saw there's a lot of names attached to them. I don't see all those people out here
Well, I
today.
can tell you that our neighborhood is full of working people who work to pay for their house and be able to live in Santa Ynez. So most of the people, the 21 neighbors that were in total agreement of not allowing this homestay, most of them are at work on a Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock and are unable to come and unwilling to lose a day's pay to pay their mortgage to come and fight a homestay that shouldn't be there anyways.
And do you know all those people?
Yes, we went to everyone. Yes, they're all my neighbors. We have an
They're all in the
awesome-
neighborhood?
Yeah,
Yes.
we have an awesome neighborhood. We know our neighbors. We hang. It's a great place to raise our kids. Most of us have lived there for many years. I've been in this house with my husband and kids for 22 years.
Do any of my fellow commissioners have questions of the appellants? Okay. Go
Thank
take a
you for
seat.
your time.
You'll get
Yes,
another
thank you.
shot at rebuttal. So let's go on to our applicant. Is the applicant here? Or agent for the applicant?
I'm Brian McInerney.
Okay. Would you identify yourself for the record?
Brian McInerney, owner of the property at 1444 Refugio.
Well, go ahead. And so
Okay.
I'll give you the same amount of time.
Sure.
30 minutes, and you kind of divide it up how you want to use it.
Okay, you had some questions regarding how long we've owned the property? We've owned it about 5 years. And initially, we owned it as a second home for ourselves. We've furnished it accordingly, and we've used it ourselves. We also had a long-term tenant that was a short-term tenant. They were sold a house here in Santa Barbara and needed a 3-month stay, and they ended up staying 3.5 years. So we had rented it long-term through, I think, November of 2017, something like that, long-term. And then we looked for a long-term tenant again. It wasn't available at the time, and so we looked at renting it as an Airbnb, which we did in 2018. My wife had called the county regarding the licensing and the permit process during that period of time, and we were told that we needed to put in our application for homestay by, I believe it was October 1st or November 1st of 2018, something like that, of which we did attempt to do that, but found that we needed to have a different formula. We needed to be able to run it as a homestay or make that as an option, because we also use the house ourselves. We have a business in Solvang, and so we use the house from time to time when we're in the area. So it wasn't intended to be a money-making hotel as described. I've met both of our neighbors. They have my phone number. I've never gotten a call about a complaint or noise. So I'm a little surprised at the amount of complaint that is being concerned about or alleged. Certainly I would have liked to have heard, because we would have done whatever was necessary to correct it. We don't want to impact the neighborhood. We don't want to impact you guys negatively. And if we have, we need to talk about that, because you've never spoken to me about it. Brad across the street, I've interacted with him a few times. He's familiar with that we have a long-term tenant in the ADU. So all of those things are real. We made our application for the ADU in I believe it was either late November or December of 2018. Got that unit approved for that, so that we could move on to having the homestay application. We went through the entire process as described in all the ordinances and the permitting process. We do have a 3-car garage there, and I also had given the planning department schematic of the additional parking for the homestay. That is the outside area. It's 3 or 4 spaces. I believe there's a schematic that I had laid out as part of the permit process and delivered to Kim at North County. And in reference to the June homestay person. When we got our permit, what I thought was a permit with a 10-day appeal process, my understanding was that we could rent it, and if there was no appeal, then they sent us some other piece of paper that allowed us to have the 1-year continuance. So that was why we rented it during that period of time. And I agree, you met that person. I rented it during that period, but my idea, my concept was that it was allowable, and that's what I was told at the time when I was at the planning office in North County. In reference to TOT, in November of either October or November of 2018, I went to this building, went to the tax collector's office to pay TOT, and was told that they wouldn't accept the TOT because I didn't have a certification number. And so I wanted to go through that process and do that, but I needed to get a certification number. And if you look on the form, there's a slot on the occupancy tax form that requires that. Finally, through having the permit, I was able to meet with Mr. Diem, I think it is, here in the tax collector's department, and we paid TOT tax. And so anyway, that's in reference to those issues. Any other questions?
Anyone? Are you done?
I think so. There was, let me just review a couple of the notes here I have.
Oh, Mr. McNerney, I remembered a question that someone else asked, and that was, do you have a written rental agreement with your long-term tenant?
I do, and it was provided to the planning department upon our application for the homestay, and it is included in the package that we were permitted to, and got the permit for. I have a copy of the front page of the tenant's previous. They've been there since sometime in 2018, so they've been there a long time, And there are two people there. It's a gentleman, and I think the wife or girlfriend works at a school in San Ynez.
Okay.
I guess that's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McNerney.
Thank you.
Let's go on to public comment. I only have one speaker slip. This one. And it's Brad Yos. I don't know if I pronounced your name correctly. I've been trying for months, but Jose. Okay. I
Morning,
think I
Commissioners.
conducted that. I moderated the candidates hearing, and I botched her name for about 90 minutes there, didn't I?
That's
Yeah,
right.
you remember me.
That's okay. I knew. I told my wife, I know him from some way.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks, commissioners and staff. Appreciate all the work you guys do on this. My main concern is really the overall homestay. That being allowed in a neighborhood. Originally, I can understand it was to help out, I believe, homeowners probably trying to make some extra money. I could see some seniors, kids have gone, they got extra rooms, taxes are going up, it's hard to meet ends, and so you do homestay, and that helps out. And now it's morphed into something, and it's not your fault. You guys implement the policy that our Board of Supes, approve. So I really emphasize with you people. But now homestay is turned into a commercial business, and it's not good for the neighborhoods. I generated that number, 6,570. I just looked at policy, multiplied, and that's what you can have to your neighborhood. It's really a bad situation, and I think overall it needs to be changed, but we're not here today to change policy. That's not your job. But I just want to emphasize the reason I'm standing up here because it's important. I don't have investments. I don't have stocks, bonds, gold. Our house is our investment. That's all we had our entire life. I built our own homes, and like I say, that's it. I'm now retired, and so I'm here to protect our investment and our local communities. Just the numbers of people, of strangers in the area is what really bothers me. And I don't have anything against Mr. McInerney. As a matter of fact, I taken care of his St. Bernard when it got loose before I even knew him, and a nice fella, okay? And I don't appreciate neighbor against neighbor. And this is what this policy has created also. Once again, I just want to state, I want to protect the neighborhood, our families, and our investment. And the other part here I really have concern on is the enforcement of these policies. Just the noise complaint, as was noted earlier, it goes to 10, you get an hour to notify, and then there's 2 hours to get compliance. It's 1 o'clock. And then who are we going to call? The police? I read the newspapers. Our police are so understaffed and dealing with real issues. And we got, I don't want to get into it, but we got drug issues in the valley now. Big time drug issues going on. And they're out chasing that stuff, trying to correct that, versus they get a call for a loud noise. That's low priority. Okay.
Mr. Jose, are you ready to wrap up? We have a 3-minute speaker
Oh,
limit.
man. Okay. But anyway, I just like to see our neighborhoods protected. That's the bottom line here. And I thank you for doing your job. It's a rough job. I'm on the water department. I'm a trustee. I deal with it too. So I know you guys have difficult things to make decisions on, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Do we have any other speaker slips, Ms. Bradley? Okay, then let's go back to appellant's rebuttal. What's that? You have 14 minutes, I'm informed by Mr. Villalobos. I bet you can't think of 14 minutes worth of things to say, but you go for it.
I just really want to reiterate that honestly, there has not been compliance. The noise has been very disturbing to our family, to our household. He has had a renter in this property the entire time. Nothing has changed. Am I to be made the police to police this house? Am I supposed to really be running the code that the soups have put together? This is not neighborhood good. We just want to live our lives. My husband's a retired law enforcement. We know what is coming to that house and the potentials of coming into our neighborhood with the sheer numbers. We didn't scrape and save and buy our house as Brad and Kim has and all our neighbors have to have our property values be brought down by this hotel. I'm in the hotel business. This is a hotel. It does exactly what our 2 hotels here in Santa Barbara does. It rents rooms on a short-term basis with TOT tax due. It is supposed to conform just like a hotel. I understand this is the policy that Santa Barbara County supervisors have put in, which we hope comes to a change with either voting it in as a change, changing people out, or something. But right now, what we're dealing with is this one house in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood has been changed. My life has been changed. I shouldn't have to put up with this on a nightly basis when people are paying $550 minimally a night to stay at this party house. That is exactly what it is, a party house. again, is not a cute little rental that a family with 2 kids comes to visit our area. It is advertised as a party house. It is being used as a party house. Please, bring me back my piece of life into my neighborhood for me and my neighbors. It is not right that this is here, and he is not complying by the rules that you have set forth. He did not comply from day one. My understanding is he has other ones. He knew the rules. So until he gets caught, he's going to continue the bad behavior? That's not right, that we have to play police for the county of Santa Barbara for somebody who's just trying to make a business in a residential area. I can go out and buy 15 houses next to all of you. None of us want this next to us. I know the codes are there. If he's within code and playing by the rules, that's one thing. He is not. He has not from day one. Why he would be given this permit is simply, clearly, the wrong decision for this commission to make.
And I just reiterate that it's by staff's own wording that anyone that has been issued a permit will comply. Will comply. It's pretty strong language. He has shown he doesn't comply. And so with that, I just would really urge this commission to just vote no on his permit. Thank you.
Thank you again for your time and all your hard work. We do appreciate it.
You know, Ms. Romasana,
Yes, sir.
I've never met you,
Yes,
but
sir.
I knew your father for over 40 years.
Yes.
And I've been looking at you and thinking, boy, you sure look a lot like your dad. But now I've decided you sure sound a lot like your dad. So,
I do. I have, I hope, most of his great qualities. My father was a fighter for the city and county of Santa Barbara. If you knew my father, you knew his values were for the people of Santa Barbara. It wasn't just for my father and our family. My father fought for decades for the betterment of our community. And I do stand here with my father's values, with my father's voice, and the knowledge that he has given me through all these years, that indeed this is not good for my neighborhood, our community, or anybody else. I know it's a bigger issue than what we're talking about, but we can start with this one house. And I'm letting you know it has completely changed the quality of our lives. This commission and the county sets policy and code that affect our quality of life. It's supposed to make our quality of life better, not worse. This has certainly made our family household and my neighborhood worse. I thank you for your nice comments about my father. We miss him terribly.
I do too.
Thank you.
Mr. McInerney, I'm sorry for botching your name. I hope that's right. Do you have a rebuttal? Okay, close enough. You come to it.
Yeah, I'll come to it. So, yeah, it's an annual permit, as you all are aware. So if there's non-compliance, if there's complaints, we can't renew in the future. That's why it's set up that way. It's certainly our intent to be a good neighbor. It's never been our intent to cause them or any neighbor any kind of, situation where they're uncomfortable or they're having to deal with issues that are our issues. That's why our telephone number is part of that permit, and all the neighbors have that telephone number. You call me at 10:01 because there's an issue with that tenant, then I'm responsible. That's my responsibility to deal with it. It's not the sheriff's department. It's no one else's responsibility. I'm a good neighbor. It's my responsibility. So that's moving forward. If you go ahead and allow us to have the permit, that's who I am. That's what I want. If a neighbor that's a long-term tenant has a party and it's my tenant, I want my neighbor to call me still, whether it's a short-term tenant or a long-term tenant. It's a neighborhood issue. I have no other short-term or homestay rentals in the county or anywhere else. So whatever information you have about me, you're misinformed. I have one. She knows my permit. I've gone through the process. I've tried to be within the code as it's written, and certainly there was mistakes made on my part, or misinformation given to us at some point, or we didn't hear it correctly. But anyway, we have made every effort to comply, and we're permitted within the code as it stands today. And that's what we are.
I heard two things that I wanted you to address and rebuttal, and I think you had just addressed one, that you don't have other homestay operations.
That's correct.
And then the other thing was the assertion that this is essentially a party house, given the size of the rental, three bedrooms, some say 4. What's your experience there? Are you renting to young couples with kids? Are you renting to large groups? What are you renting to?
Our intent is we use the house ourselves. We don't want our furniture thrashed. We do not want it to be a party house. We've made large improvements, just like they have made improvements to their homes, to that property since we bought it in 2013 or 14. So we don't want damage to the property. We want to be able to go there ourselves and stay there without having to be concerned that someone has trashed the property or it's been a party house. That's not our intent. Again, we've never gotten a call from a neighbor, so I'm not aware of it being the party house. There may have been issues, and you might have called because of those issues, but please, you have my number. You call me if we move forward with this. Currently, currently the house is rented on a month-to-month basis. The homestay area, and so we have a tenant in there that is in transition, moving to the community from out of the area and buying a home in San Ynez, and they needed something short-term. So, anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you.
Then we'll close the public hearing. We have questions of, first of all, does staff have any rebuttal or other comments staff would like to make with regard to what you've heard in the public comment? Okay. Then next thing is commissioners can ask questions of staff about what they've just heard. And let me ask you, Ms. Byler, I think we heard from Mr. McInerney, I can't pronounce your name, I'm sorry, that he had the understanding that after his initial approval of his permit, but before the appeal period ran out, that he was informed he could operate. Are you aware of this? Do you have any comment on whether that's true or not?
Thank you for your question, Chair Park. I don't have any recollection of that information. I apologize that the applicant was given that information, maybe by somebody at the counter. It was a mistake if that information was given out.
Well, typically a permit's not issued until after the appeal period's run out, right?
That's correct, Chair
That's
Park.
true of every permit, right? I thought so. Okay, any other questions of Ms. Byler by Planning Commission members? Ms. Bradley?
Perini's got one up here.
Okay, let's go with Mr. Franny first.
And I'm not sure, perhaps you were calling on Commissioner Bradley, and she may have the same question.
Well, I called on her and you spoke, so we're going to start with you.
Okay, it goes to the parking, and as described by neighbors and how it's occupied, it seems that, and if it were a hotel or it was a high occupancy unit like it's being used, then there has to be some order in how that place is parked and some type of limits, just like on any other development. And my concern here would be for emergency services and fire. If there is no defined, if there's not enough room, if it's not defined properly, we've heard that the garages are not available. It just seems like it's haphazard and a setup for a safety problem down the road, whether it's fire or other emergency services. Can staff help me through that, please?
So Chair Park, Commissioner Freeney, I'll start, and then Mrs. Byler? We'll finish if needed. So just, I think there's a question on parking and the number of visitors and parking and the potential tenants of the homestay in regards to parking. So just one of the things to keep in mind is that the ordinance does require all parking to be on-site. So on-street parking is not allowed per the ordinance. And so that is already, the ordinance is already self-limiting the amount of visitors that could be available at this location. So if the homestay is rented out to the 3 bedrooms and those occupants use all the parking and there's no available parking, then the ordinance already limits the availability of any additional visitors or anyone else to reach the site. So it's already self-limiting as far as the parking availability. In regards to the safety, not quite sure what the question was in regards to safety, but the single-family dwelling and any associated residences would have been reviewed on their at construction by the fire department for safety access, and so this would continue to operate under those reviews. And if there's any issues, then that would have been addressed during the construction phase. So I'm not quite sure the question on the safety aspect of it, as the ordinance is already limiting any parking to be on site.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Okay. Ms. Bradley, I believe you had a question of staff?
Yes, and actually, I don't want to go too far afield from the application, but I'm more familiar with how the city of Santa Barbara has struggled with the short-term rental issue. And so I'm wondering, homestays are for individual rooms to be rented out in a home. Does the county's code have a separate thing for short-term rentals of the whole house? That's this whole separate thing, and I just need to read up on that to understand those rules, which are separate than what's before us today, right?
Chair Park, Commissioner Bradley. So you're correct. There's a separate. The homestay has its own regulations found in the Land Use and Development Code, and so that's what's before the commission today. So, and then just on the side, short-term rentals are not allowed in the inland area.
Oh. Okay. Well, thank you.
And just a clarification, there are limited allowed use in commercial zones. However, the application before you is for a homestay application. There's specific regulations that govern the permitting and use of homestays.
So by extension, it's probably because short-term rentals are not allowed in the inland area that we're seeing homestay applications, because frankly, if the whole house is being rented, it would be more like a classic home, short-term rental model. Okay. So, I think that was it. The only, I still have concerns about parking because, 320 square feet is not even enough. A standard parking stall requires 200 square feet. It's a 10 by 20 space, and then you have to have maneuvering room. So in our parking standards, it is only for a couple extra spaces. But that set aside, I don't have any other questions at this time.
Okay, it looks like we're done with our questions of staff. We'll move on to deliberations. I'm going to lead off because this is in my district. Some of what I'm going to say will be familiar to the commissioners other than Ms. Bradley, because you've heard me say it before in relation to the other San Ynez Valley homestay appeal we had last spring. I heard Ms. Romasana say that this is a larger issue than just this property. I agree with that. She said that, but it starts here with this one. Well, I disagree with that. No, it started with that other one. So this is the second one. And it makes a difference, because I think that we've had a lot of problems in this county in enforcing our homestay ordinance. I think we saw that with the item I was referring to, because there we denied the application, granted the appeal, and the homestay operation continued. There's going to be a hearing on fines and so forth in a few days on that one. That's one where the neighbor who brought the appeal in the first place after succeeding with her appeal, tried to sell her house. It was in escrow, and escrow was canceled once the buyer's agent learned of the continuing homestay operation. That's what you may face, you folks. That's what everyone who lives in the valley may face. So it is a serious problem. I'm going to go through my logic here. This is a de novo hearing, right? Yeah, everybody's agreeing. That means we're hearing this as though it's new. And there's a consequence to it being a de novo hearing, because that puts the burden of proof on the applicant. And I think the applicant has failed to carry that burden of proof, and I'm going to explain why. And when I say they failed to carry the burden of proof, I'll make it real obvious. That means that I do not support the application, and I do support the granting of the appeal. First issue, when you have a de novo hearing and one where there's some disagreement over facts, and there's some disagreement here over the reasons for why certain things happen and what the noise levels are like and all sorts of things, is you look at credibility. Credibility here on the 21 names that are submitted with the application. I recognize some of them. I've already pointed out that I knew Ms. Romasana's father for a very long time. And I see that Mr. Citron's name is there. He's been a sheriff's deputy for, I think, 2 decades and has served this county honorably in some very dangerous assignments, undercover and other things. So I think he's a trustworthy person as well. Mr. Jose, I've screwed up his name every time I've said it, but he is a member of a very visible government body, our Conservation Water District, and I think you were the highest vote getter in that last election, were you not? I think you were. And that shows that hundreds, if not thousands, of people in my community trust Mr. Jose as well. So I think that the appellants have a high degree of credibility, at least with me. On the applicant's side, I think the applicant is a nice person, but I think there are consequences to things. And here we had an approximately year-long illegal operation of a homestay, even though we are all very familiar with this new ordinance. And we've had a continuing violation in June. And there are consequences to those things. You don't just go get a permit and say, oh, well, sorry, my bad. There are consequences, and I think one of the consequences is it affects your credibility, and it does here. So I think that the appellants win on the credibility contest. Now let me get to the issues. One issue is it inhabited by an owner or a long-term tenant? You know, I don't like this process. I've been doing landlord-tenant law for over 40 years, among other things, and we look at leases and we look at declarations and sworn testimony and so forth, and for staff to rely on a driver's license and an internet utility bill is not very compelling evidence to me. There's a lot better evidence. But I'm not going to beat that one to death because I don't think that's the most important issue. Most important issue to me here is LUDC section 3542.193, which states, I'm quoting from the staff report, the purpose and intent of this section is to establish standards that will regulate the use of dwellings as homestays in order to ensure that homestays are, I'm going to emphasize this, compatible with and do not adversely impact surrounding properties. Now, and at the prior hearing on another matter, we were told, well, that's not really in the standards themselves, but it came first. It's the very first thing that's stated in this section, and it reminds me of our civil code, and this is something I've litigated many times in the rules of construction for construing both agreements, documents of all sorts, and also statutes. One of the cardinal rules of construction is that you interpret language to give effect to every word. If the words wouldn't be there if they weren't intended to mean something. So this is intended to mean something, and I think it means that we have to find that the homestay was compatible with and does not adversely impact surrounding properties. And I could never make that finding here. I think we've got a real problem. You know, I've mentioned the value issue. I I'll refer a little bit to what everybody thought was going to be happening here. You talk about homestays, and most folks think of, well, you know, this allows grandma to rent out a room to a nice young couple and maybe their kids, and grandma can stay in her house and they'll have a nice time. I don't think people pass this ordinance in order to allow folks to hold on to properties as absentee owners and rent them out as party houses. That may sound like a disparaging term, but if you live up there and you watch these rentals, that's just what they're being used for. So I get that. One thing that the neighbors did not refer to, and I'm not criticizing you for this, you had a limited period of time and you're not professionals. Something I thought about as I'm driving there today, this homestay's on a busy road, and I am a little concerned about large groups of people parting there along that busy road, and I hope they're not bringing their kids, because that Refugio Road, there's a lot of traffic going up and down pretty fast, especially since the high school is just down at the bottom of the road, and there's tons of traffic in the morning. It's really at all times. So there are issues with these homestays that we're just beginning to realize. But I've seen enough here, and so my vote will be to grant the appeal, and that will be my motion, to grant the appeal. Any other comments?
Second.
Ms. Briley.
Thank you, Commissioner Park. So I try to be very objective in going into each one of these hearings, and I've had some experience with homestays. In fact, in my small Mesa neighborhood, I've got 3 of them within 2 blocks, and they're okay. They're not great, but they're okay because the owners and neighbors work together. Turning to the decision today, I would support Commissioner Park's motion to uphold the appeal and deny the project. And to help staff, the issues that I would have in terms of making the findings, because I think we're going to have to continue it if there's enough votes in that direction, would be that I couldn't make the finding of consistency with Land Use Development Policy 4, because I don't think that there are adequate public services to serve this case. Also, goal LUG SYV and VIS SYV-1, because it will not protect the semi-rural character of the San Ynez Valley in those 2 general plan consistencies. And then I also could not make a finding of consistency with Noise Element Policy 1. We talked a little bit about noise, but I know that the 65 decibel is the standard. In this particular neighborhood, it's much more quiet than most places in Santa Barbara City. And so even a 45 decibel would probably be disturbing to neighbors. So those are 1, 2, 3, Noise Element Policy 4, Policy 1, and then Policy LUG SYV 7 are the general plan policies that I would have a hard time finding consistency with, if that helps in your redrafting of the findings. That's my comments.
There you go. Mr. Blau, did you want to be heard before we go to a vote?
Chair Park, Commissioners, before Commissioner Blau makes his comment, if I could just indicate the information before you doesn't support the potential motion. So we before we take a vote on it and the motion, there could be some options today if we want to just resolve this today. The other item was trailed to after this item, and we're going to bring back appropriate findings on that project. And then we could do the same on this one if the commissioners would be willing to stick around for a few minutes so that staff could draft findings to support a motion that is not presented to you today.
I think that makes sense if the rest of the commission will bear with us. Then we don't have to face it again in 5-6 weeks, and the applicant doesn't have to come back, and the appellants don't have to wonder what the heck's going on. So I'd like to do that. I knew that was coming, Mr. Wilson, because it happens every time I make a motion. All right, then let's.
Well, Commissioner Park, can we talk about that for just a minute? And I'm not sure if there's any other comments from the other commissioners, but
go ahead, Ms. Bradley.
I'm a little concerned about putting staff in a box of having to redraft findings, because I think these kinds of findings are going to move forward with policy implications on an appeal if Mr. McInerney chooses to do so. So I just double check with staff. If you're all good with doing a whole revised set of findings in half hour, it's faster than I work, but just throwing it out there in case. We do have another hearing coming up on September 13th, correctly? Right? So maybe.
Oh, they don't want to go there.
No, okay. All right, just a thought.
So will you
So I
address Ms.
will
Briley's
weigh in
point?
now.
What would you prefer to do? Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you ready for me?
Yes. Oh, Commissioner Blau.
Pardon? Thank you. I'm not so certain as maybe my fellow commissioners are on this, because this is an idea that I think the board has kind of screwed up from whenever they did away with short-term rentals. I mean, the reality is the only real problem I heard today, which is the problem I constantly heard when we talked about short-term rentals, was noise. And I don't understand today why we're trying to take a sledgehammer to something that needs a scalpel. If you give the sheriff a $300 decibel meter and he goes up to the property and it exceeds 65 decibels, you get a fine. First fine, $100. Second fine, $500. Third fine, $1,000. The noise issue in the party houses will go away. And I think, as the applicant expressed, right now he has a short-term rental, which is our short-term renter, which is a guy that is moving to the valley, and rather than renting a hotel for he and his family, they might rent this house for 2 or 3 months while he goes through the house buying process. That's something that makes sense. Although I see what we did away with short-term rentals, and that was a sledgehammer. And now we come back and we're saying, well, you could do, homestays, but we'll give you a rule where you have to have a long-term tenant or an owner in part of the property, and you have a maximum of 3 bedrooms. It's like, okay, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. It's a short-term rental, but just one that's got maybe a few rules that are trying to do it. I will say beyond that, I would hope that staff, as we see more of these appeals, and we're going to bring back findings for both ways, so we don't have this issue where we have to continue trail the issue or continue it. I mean, it's either compatible with the neighborhood or it's not. And I just hate the fact that the staff tries to decide for the commission which way we're going to vote, and only brings the stuff in that would allow it to make a decision one way. This is one of the fewest jurisdictions that I deal with where, normally on issues like this, the staff will have findings for both ways. So pick one. I was there last night. Either it got appealed, the appeal got approved or it got denied. And they had language for the council for both ways to do it, and findings for both things. I am going to support, I'm going to defer to the chair, since it is his district, but I think we need to rethink this short-term, or this homestay issue, and maybe we need to have a couple of hearings to decide, did we get the rules right? Did we get the procedures right? I'm sitting here looking at this right now saying, we didn't do it. I hate to have another dozen hearings where people have no freaking idea how we're going to vote. Those are my comments.
Chair Part, Farini.
Yes, Mr. Freeney. And thank you, Mr. Blau.
So I did second your motion, and I continue to support that. I do want to add a few things. This does remind me a little bit of what we're facing right now with the cannabis ordinance, where we have a set of rules and regulations placed before our staff to interpret and then apply to each project. And I think in this instance, staff did their job, right? I appreciate what you pointed out early on, Chair Park, about the preamble of the ordinance and what it states. And therefore, I continue to believe that this project is not compatible with what the basic thoughts were as set forth by the board. And I think staff should be able to refer to that opening paragraph to help them find the findings for support of the appeal and denial of the project. Thank you.
Well, it's clear there's sentiment here at the commission to get some of these rules reworked because we think that will actually help out applicants and appellants in the long run. I think that's well stated by Commissioner Plow and Commissioner Farini. So, Mr. Wilson, what is your preference? What is staff's preference with regard to whether we continue this for a few minutes or for a few weeks? What would you like to do?
Chair Park, members of the commission, we have a prior item that we could use that had similar issues. So my recommendation, looking at the projection report and other items that are coming before us, if the commission's willing, I would rather just take a break, take a long lunch, and come back and just let us resolve it today. Working with staff, I think we can come back with findings that would support the motion to uphold the appeal and deny the project. So that would be my recommendation, is if we could just resolve both these items today. And I think we're close to being able to come back and work on the other items. So if we took a 5-10 minute break, I think we could come back and close out on the other item, and then we could take a long lunch if you would like, and then come back. And I think we would need maybe about an hour to come back with findings, if the commission would be willing to do that.
I can do that. I don't know about my other commissioners, what you prefer. I know both Mr. Blau and Mr. Farini have had some back and neck issues, and I'm not sure you want to sit around for an hour. What would you guys like to do up there?
I'd actually prefer not to. I mean, I don't see any reason why you couldn't continue this for a short period of time. I mean, obviously the applicant now knows that we're not going to issue the permit, and I think the appellants know that we're going to uphold their appeal. And for me, put this on a consent calendar in the future, and I'm good to go.
Okay. Ms. Bradley, would you want to weigh in on this, what you would prefer?
I'm okay either way. I can stay, but I can go along with the continuance too, so I'm...
Okay. I think it's probably best, Mr. Wilson, that we continue this to another hearing.
Chair Park, members of the commission, looking at the projection report, we are meeting next Friday. I know there's a lot of items, or there's a couple items on that hearing. We could continue it to next Friday, or the next hearing after that would be September 25th, and we could continue it to that item. And it being, it would be the first item on that agenda, and we could make it the first item on that agenda. There are a lot of items on that, but we're just bringing back findings to support the potential motion
Mr.
of
Wilson,
today.
did you say earlier that one of the items for September 13th was pulled? What was the or no?
Commissioner Freeney, through the chair, staff has received a request from one of the applications that was continued to the 13th, the West Coast Farms cannabis cultivation. They have submitted a request for that item to be continued to another hearing date from that item. But being that it was continued to a specific date, we would have to hear that request at that time.
My guess, Mr. Freeney, is that we'll have a lengthy discussion about the PEIR, and that'll kind of drive what happens with those particular matters. So whether we have 1 or 2 cannabis matters or 18, it probably won't make a heck of a lot of difference. But I think it's cruel and unusual punishment to ask anybody to come to a cannabis hearing on some other matter. So I think you ought to continue this to the 25th.
So Chair Park, members of the commission, not that I disagree with that last statement. This could be the first item on the 13th, and it would be in Santa Maria. So that's just for your consideration. Otherwise, we can continue it to the 25th.
What do you prefer? I'm
If I could
indifferent.
just say one more, and this is probably for Ms. Richardson. The chair has closed the public hearing on this item, and we're not going to be bringing it back with any new additional information. So it seems to me that you could just simply read it into the record for the purposes of taking the vote with the new findings. So we don't have public hearing, we don't have public comment. It shouldn't take more than 4 minutes.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, since we would be coming back with new analysis and findings, I'd recommend giving the applicant and the appellant and the public a chance to respond, although it would probably be briefer than this time.
I
if
think
you'd
you're
like.
right, but I do think you're right that they're entitled to public comment on that. So, my motion would be to continue it to the September 25th with instructions to staff to prepare appropriate findings in support of granting of the appeal and denial of the application. Do you accept that amendment to the motion, Mr. Farini?
Yes.
And will you conduct a roll call vote? Mr. Villalobos?
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Farini,
Aye.
Commissioner Blau,
Aye.
Chair Park.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
So let's take a 10-minute break so you can address what you need to do on the first item. Then we'll come back and move pretty quickly, I presume, and then we'll adjourn after that. Okay, thank you. Sure, I'll just be out there finishing my breakfast drink.
Okay, we're going to reconvene the Planning Commission meeting and take up our original item 1 with a revised set of findings handily provided by staff. So where we last left the discussion was my 2 commissioners in the North County were happy to make findings to approve the fence and uphold the appeal. Do I have that right? Uphold the appeal and approve the project. So we have those revised findings. Do either one of you gentlemen want to try for a motion?
I believe I can now make staff's recommendations, is that right? Commissioner, yeah. Recommendation on the second page? Third page. Page 3, recommendations and procedures. I'll make staff's recommendation. Motion.
Second.
Okay, so all those in favor? Or no, actually, we asked Mr. Villalobos to do that, correct? Thank you.
Yeah, when we have commissioners in multiple places, we have to do roll call.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Farini.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye.
Chair Brightly.
No.
Motion passes 2-1.
We welcome back Chair Park.